Whenever I see a beautiful, cloudy sky, it reminds me of the place where I was born and lived for the first 14 years of my life. This is Friesland, a northern province of the Netherlands. I was born in the town of Drachten and spent a great deal of my early youth in Marum, 8 miles to the east. My maternal grandparents owned a small farm in the countryside on a dirt road called the Houtwal. In all these years, the road has not changed. What has changed is my grandparents' farmhouse. It has been rebuilt and the back part taken away. This is what the house looked like when I stayed here as a boy. It was a simple house and a special place for me that held many fond memories. The front part of the farmhouse, facing the road, were the living quarters. The back part with a thatched roof was where the 2 cows were kept. The milk was sold to the dairy factory in Marum. It also was a place to store the hay. That's me, 3.5 years old, playing with my favorite cart in the yard on the side of the house. Here's my grandmother. I called her Beppe, which is the Frisian name for grandmother. As a young woman, she delivered bread on a bicycle with a huge hamper attached to the bike. I remember sitting on the back of her bicycle going to church and seeing a man with a long beard there and thinking that he was God. Beppe was a strong-willed, religious woman. She was from a family of 5 brothers and 1 sister, and only spoke Frisian with occasional Dutch. She did all the work on the farm, including milking the 2 cows. I remember Beppe catching mice with her bare hands in the small attic in front of the hayloft. My grandfather, known as Spake in Frisian, was a quiet, gentle, soft-spoken man, 9 years older than Beppe. He was one of 3 brothers, all small farmers, all living in Marum. Spake took his cap off before each meal, did a silent prayer, and would cough softly that the prayer was over and we could start eating. There was no electricity in the farmhouse. In the afternoon, I sat on Pake's knee and waited for daylight to fade. When it was dark enough, we would turn on the kerosene lamp. It's the summer of 1941. My mother is holding my sister, who was born in May of that year. And I'm holding one of the cats that were always part of farm life. I was always intrigued with Bakke's left hand. He was missing one finger, and another finger was permanently bent, so he was always covering it with his right hand. He wasn't able to milk the cows or do farm chores. In April of 1948, while getting out of bed one morning, Bakke died of a heart attack at the age of 71. A year after his death, the farmhouse was sold. And Beppe lived with my uncle and his family for 12 years and died once he was 76. This is the Reformed church in Marum, built in the 13th century. And here in the graveyard, next to each other, is Bakke and Beppe's final resting place. My mother was born in Marum in February 1913. Here is an early photo of her when she was 12. She had one brother, Sala. She is 16 years old here, and Sala is 14. She's now 19 in this group photo of the Christian Girl Association. My father was born in the Vulp, a small village below Marum. They went to the same school and church in the Vulp. He was a year older than my mother. Here's my father, 20 years old, at a gathering of the Christian Men Association. When I was growing up, I didn't know my paternal grandparents very well. We didn't visit them as much as we did with Bakke and Beppe in the Houtwal. This is my mother in her early 20s. And here's my father, now 21 years old. This is their engagement photo. They got married on May 22nd, 1937. And I was born a year later, on March 22nd, 1938. When I was 3 weeks old, I was baptized and given the names of both of my grandfathers, Peter, Hans. And almost every year, my picture was taken in the local photo studio. A rare photo of our family together in front of the furniture factory where my father worked. We lived in Drachten. The house we rented was part of a small duplex. The front side faced east, and windows on the south side faced a narrow alley. I remember it as a dark, gloomy place with little daylight coming in. This is my kindergarten class. And this is me, 5 years old. One event that is etched in my memory forever was when I sat on my father's shoulder, and he told me never to forget this day. It was May 5th, 1945, and the liberation of our town by the Canadian Allied Forces as they drove through our main street. It was the end of the long German occupation, the end of World War II. I was 7 years old. I did not forget. My mother was ill a lot. She had a problem with her stomach. To make it easier for my mother, and also since I wasn't doing well at school, it was decided that I should live with my uncle and family for a year. They lived in Assen, 26 miles from Drachten. I remember Beppe taking me to Assen from Marum. We got up very early. The moon was out, and walking to the train station and then traveling via Groningen to Assen. My uncle was a school teacher there. After a couple of months, I was doing much better in school. But I missed my father and mother a lot. Assen, 2 december 1945. Lieve Heid en Moeke, hoe is het met u? Wordt Moeke al wat beter? Ik hoop van wel. Ik bid elke avond voor Moeke. Ik vind het fijn op de school. Heeft Heid het ook druk op de werkplaats? Ik heb mijn nieuwe pakje al aan. Vele zoenen van Piet.
Januari 1946, lieve broer en zuster Piet en Greta. Het is zondagmiddag, de zuster is hier net geweest om me klaar te maken voor de operatie morgen. Ik zie er wel tegenop, maar nu het niet anders kan, is het toch het beste. We zullen bidden dat het dan maar beter mag worden. Ons leven is in Gods hand. Het is altijd een troost dat we nooit alleen zijn. Ontvang hiermee de groeten van mij en voor Piet veel zoenen. Nou dag, Jeltje.
We had to wait a long time in the waiting room before we were finally allowed to visit her. I had to climb on a stool to kiss and greet her. It was such a special occasion for me because I hadn't seen her in months. As an 8-year-old boy, I walked behind the hearse, along with my family, into the cemetery. I was very stoic, and I was not crying because I believed that my mother was now with God in heaven. On my 10th birthday, my father surprised me with a beautiful 3-speed Raleigh bicycle. It was one of the happiest days of my life. I was now able to explore Drachten and the world around it. I'm 12 years old and in grade 6. My report card showed that I was doing well in school. Tekenen, which means drawing, were my highest grades, 3 9s, 10 being the highest. I had an innate talent for drawing. My father remarried in May of 1949. His new wife was a widow with 1 daughter. My new mother lived 2 houses away from us, so we moved out of our old house where we had lived for 11 years. Here's a new family, carefully arranged by the photographer. On the left is my stepsister, Anneke. She was 2.5 years younger than me. Then my father, Herman. My sister, Frances. There I am, all decked up in a suit. And my stepmother, Elizabeth. My father owned a cabinet maker's workshop. He worked for himself for 8 years, and business wasn't going well. So emigration seemed to be a solution for him, and maybe a better life for all of us. First, he was thinking of going to South Africa, but finally decided that Canada was going to be our promised land. The organization that sponsored us in Canada was the Christian Reformed Church. They would provide housing and find employment for my father. The Dutch government paid for the transportation to Canada, and the Holland America line provided the ship. So we uprooted ourselves from Friesland, left family and friends behind. The familiar faded away. We were now adventurers, traveling to the new world. I was 14 years old. The ship that transported us to Canada was the steamship Waterman. Not a large boat, only 9,000 tons, and able to carry about 840 passengers. She was originally a United States troop and cargo ship, one of a fleet of Victory ships built in Portland, Oregon, and launched in January 1945. The Dutch government bought the ship in 1947 to transport troops to and from Indonesia, and later rebuilt it to ferry immigrants out of Holland. This is the original passenger list booklet for the transatlantic voyage. There were 833 immigrants on board, with one minister, Reverend A.M. Spiering, tending to our spiritual needs. Here are our names, under the H's in the passengers list. My stepsister is listed as A.I. Riemersma. The alphabetical listing ended with the Dutch surname Zwerver, which translates as wanderer, a suitable name for an immigrant. My father kept a log of our ocean voyage. Tuesday, March 25, left Drachten at 5:15 a.m. and at 4:45 p.m. sailed from Rotterdam. Everybody healthy. Saw lighthouses along the coast of France and England. He also charted our course across the Atlantic, posting it at 12 noon every day. Wednesday, March 26, Queen Mary sailed past us. Brilliant sunny weather along coast of England. Thursday, strong wind and cloudy. Everybody seasick except me. Sea is wild. Friday, strong wind. Annika still seasick. Pete almost okay. Sunday, March 30th. Good weather. In the morning church service with Reverend Spiering. Monday, cold weather and sunny, boat under Newfoundland. Tuesday, April 1st. Sunny, brisk weather. In the afternoon, arrival in Halifax. It had taken us 7 days to cross the North Atlantic, from the Netherlands to Canada. It was a safe journey. We didn't hit any icebergs. But we still had more travel ahead of us. From Halifax, we took the train and traveled through the provinces of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, to southern Ontario, and after 2 days arrived in Chatham, a Canadian town 50 miles east of Detroit. The reason we went to Chatham was that my father knew some people who had emigrated there from Drachten the year before. We lived in an old farmhouse set up by the church. It was located outside town, and we did a lot of walking. It's April 25th. We're almost a month in Canada, and we're enjoying the sun in a wooded area nearby the farmhouse, the Emigrantenhuis, as we called it. Canada needed agricultural workers, so my father was sorting potatoes at 75 cents an hour. After 2 months, my dad found a job where he could use his furniture-making skills. Once again, we were moving, this time 170 miles east of Chatham, to Niagara on the Lake, a small historic town 18 miles above Niagara Falls, and beautifully situated where the Niagara River flows into Lake Ontario. My father began to work for Shepherd Boats, the leading builder of wooden powerboats in Canada. He worked 5.5 days a week with a starting wage of $1.25 an hour. Shepherd Boats was located on the waterfront, at the edge of the river, next to the small harbor. The view was as great then as it is now, looking across the Niagara River toward Old Fort Niagara in New York State. The War Memorial in the center of town dominates Queen Street. When we lived here, Niagara on the Lake was a quiet and laid-back place. Many historic buildings lined the wide, tree-shaded streets, and it was a lovely summer resort. Since then, the town has become a major tourist attraction with over 1 million visitors a year. I always remember the Niagara Apothecary being there, Ontario's oldest pharmacy, now a museum. Still in the same location on Queen Street, after 82 years, is the Greaves Jam and Marmalade store. This beautiful historic brick house, built in 1820, is the McDougald Harrison House. Here's where my mother was a cleaning woman for many years. In the morning, 3 hours for $2, and then in the afternoon, next door, in the daughter's house, another 3 hours for $2 more. This is Queen's Royal Park on the east side of town. 50 years ago, this was the public beach with the lifeguard tower and boat traffic on the river. Not only did we swim here in the river, but we also swam in Lake Ontario, north of town. There was a severe housing shortage in Niagara-on-the-Lake due to a large influx of workers for the hydroelectric project in Niagara Falls. So there was no place for us to live together. My parents rented a room on King Street. Annika and Francis were staying at the Crone's house, and I lived with the Van der Waals outside town. In October, we finally found a place in an area known as Chautauqua on Vincent Avenue, and rented a summer cottage and spent our first Canadian winter there. I remember my father being very depressed, not speaking a lot. There was no way to cheer him up. The only time I heard him laugh uproariously that winter was at Van der Waal, watching Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows on their tiny black and white TV set. Despite not having a driver's license, my father did buy his very first car, a 1937 Studebaker, for $125. We now had transportation and were able to attend the Dutch Christian Reformed Church in Stamford Village, 15 miles away, held at the Women's Institute Memorial Hall, and socialize and make friends with other Dutch immigrants. On my 15th birthday, I got a Kodak Brownie Hawkeye flash camera. I now became the official photographer for all family and social gatherings. This is Tante Jo van der Waal's birthday party on July 4th, 1953, with the De Croones, their sons, and my family visiting. July 20th, Mother's birthday party with Doreen Stassen, a friend, and the Van der Waals visiting. This is Tante Jo van der Waal. She spoke beautiful Dutch and was a good friend to me. Yet another birthday party with the Van der Waals, the Van der Werfs, the Quist family, and the Allens, all part of a small social circle of Dutch friends. I didn't have a wide-angle lens on my box camera, so if there were too many people in the room, I took 2 pictures and pasted them together. Or instead, took the crowd outside. On Easter Sunday, 1953, we went for an outing and picnic to Niagara Falls. We drove along the Niagara Parkway and stopped at the scenic overlook of the Niagara River and visited General Brock's monument in Queenston Heights and continued on to Niagara Falls, where our first stop was to look at the American Falls. This 1939 Oldsmobile was our second car since coming to Canada. After 6 months, my father traded it for a 1949 Chevrolet Coupe. Now we owned a newer car, only 4 years old. Our status, at being successful immigrants, had gone up a notch. This newly restored carriage house, built in 1870, stands on the Niagara Stone Road near Virgil. 50 years ago, when we lived here, the upstairs was closed. The place was small with only 2 bedrooms, and I slept in a hallway next to the rear door. For Christmas 1953, we cooked a giant turkey, a gift from Shepherd Boats. This was the first time in our lives that we ate turkey, and we all liked it. Our oven was barely big enough to hold the bird. It was also the first time we tasted cranberries and pumpkin pie. Since film was expensive, I didn't take as many photos as I wish I had. The little harbor in Niagara-on-the-Lake was one of my favorite places. And I photographed my dad working on a boat. I never asked him whether working with boats here in Canada reminded him of the boat he once built and sailed when we were living in Friesland. This is Victoria Avenue in Niagara Falls, and here's where the school bus coming from Niagara-on-the-Lake turned off to Wentworth Circle, and each day dropping and picking us up at the high school. This busy illuminated sign is in front of a new building. The old high school no longer exists, gone, rebuilt into a 6-story art center. The only building that stayed the same is the school's auditorium. The athletic department was located to the left behind those doors. There I am, standing in gym shorts on the athletic field, holding my camera case. Nothing much happened in the 4 years I was in high school. I was a quiet and shy student. I enjoyed those 4 years. I had an easy and carefree time, and the reality of the outside world seemed far away. The Royal George Theatre in Niagara on the Lake was built in 1915 as a vaudeville theatre, entertaining the army troops stationed in town during World War I. It closed during the Depression and reopened in 1940 as the Brock Cinema and now became a small-town movie house with 328 seats. I am 16 years old here, all dressed up in a red uniform, now working at the Brock Theatre as a part-time doorman usher. Because of a strict religious upbringing, I had never seen a movie until I was 14, so it was very exciting for me to have a job in a movie theater. I stood at the entrance tearing tickets in half and went backstage before each show to open the curtain. I really liked the job, but it paid very little, so I quit after a year. Here are the original instructions that I kept over all these years. Pull curtain, check washroom, flush toilets, look for burning butts, turn lights off, lock doors, office and front. Each month, a theater calendar came out advertising the lineup of movies.
Stand aside.
The Brock was a second-run theater. Every Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m., we had a matinee for kids, so we showed a lot of Westerns. In January of 1955, we showed a lot of films made in the CinemaScope format.
Well, now's as good a time as any, Mr. Newman. Take her down to Periscope, then. Dive!
I became interested in how movies were made and photographed and started subscribing to American Cinematographer. I could not wait for each new issue to arrive in the mail. It opened a window to an exciting industry I was hoping to be part of someday.